From today, your mother will be living with us in this house. Actually, we are dating. My husband told me proudly. I've got both a boyfriend and a housekeeper. Of course, by housekeeper I mean you. She leaned on my husband's shoulder and laughed at me mockingly. How can these people say such things so calmly in this situation? I had just received a call that my childhood home had burned down and went to see it. I was shocked that my childhood home, filled with memories of my late father, was gone. However, in contrast to me, my mother seemed calm, and I felt it odd that she wasn't sad about her house burning down. But I never thought that right after bringing my mother home with my husband, they would say such ridiculous things. As I was dumbfounded by them, my husband laughed and asked, "Too shocked to even speak? You must be completely surprised to hear that your mother and I are dating." My husband laughed foolishly. "We are so in love." "Sorry, dear. Now that I'll be living here, you'll need to take good care of me as a housekeeper. For starters, I'd like steak for dinner tonight." At her words, I retorted sharply. "That's too cheeky." I don't usually use such harsh words, so they both looked stunned. "I knew about your relationship. I have proof, and I will be filing for compensation. My name is Julia. I am a 35-year-old salesperson at a trading company. I met Greg, a web designer, through work. Greg was very serious about his work and also had a flexible mind. I admired him and wanted to get to know him better, so I boldly invited him to dinner. Being with the easygoing Greg made me feel at ease, which was very comforting. Things progressed smoothly from there, and we started dating. 2 years later, Greg proposed to me. "Julia, let's get married. I will never meet a woman more wonderful than you in my life. Will you stay by my side forever?" Normally, Greg wouldn't say such cheesy lines, but he said it with a shy smile this time. His voice was a bit shaky, probably from nervousness. "Of course. I couldn't meet anyone better than you either, and I can't love anyone but you. Let's get married." I responded to his proposal with as much love-filled words as he did. Shortly after, Greg came to greet my mother at my family home. My father had passed away from an illness 5 years ago, so my mother was living alone. My 58-year-old mother looks so young, she could be mistaken for someone in her 40s or even 30s. Not only is she beautiful, but she also doesn't neglect efforts to look young. With luxurious eyelash extensions, vivid pink lipstick, beautifully curled long hair, and wearing a miniskirt, no one would think she is 58. My mother has always been beautiful, and during school events, my classmates would exclaim, "Who's that mom? She's so pretty," making me happy. However, when they realized she was my mother, they would start saying, "You don't look like her," which always made me feel down. Indeed, I did not resemble my mother, instead, I looked more like my late father. Facing my beautiful mother, a nervous Greg greeted and introduced himself. "Hello, it's nice to meet you. I'm Greg. I look forward to getting to know you." After examining Greg from head to toe, my mother suddenly beamed with a smile. "Greg, don't be so nervous. I'm Julia's mother. Let's all have some coffee together." With a higher-pitched voice than usual, she led Greg to the living room. "Yes, thank you." Relieved by my mother's welcoming demeanor, Greg seemed at ease. However, for some reason, my mother sat next to Greg. I ended up sitting across from both of them and couldn't help but express my displeasure. "Mom, why are you sitting next to Greg?" "Oh come on, it's fine. It's easier to talk honestly next to someone than across from them. After all, he's going to be my dear daughter's husband, so I need to get to know him well." She smiled sweetly. Greg looked a bit perplexed but said, "Julia, I'm okay with this." "See, Greg says it's fine." While saying that, she intertwined her arm with Greg's. "Hey. Don't link arms. Greg is troubled too." "Oh come on. A little bit is fine." "Julia, you're so noisy." Reluctantly, she unlinked her arms. "Greg, Julia has always been very outspoken. She gets angry quickly. Greg smiled at me in a reprimanding manner. Later, as the three of us had coffee, my mother was in a great mood throughout. Greg is really wonderful. I'm so happy that Julia is marrying such a handsome man. She subtly kept touching Greg throughout, though she no longer linked arms with him. I didn't scold her each time, but I felt a persistent discomfort. As the greeting was nearing its end, Greg spoke up formally. May I pray to your late husband's portrait? Oh, I'm delighted. The portrait is this way. Pleased, she led Greg to the portrait. Impressed by Greg's courteous nature, my mother was very fond of him. He's really a proper man. On the way back from my parents' home, I felt the need to apologize to Greg for my mother's behavior. Greg, thank you for today. I'm sorry my mother was so clingy and touchy. No, it's totally fine. I'm relieved that your mother is such an approachable person. It looks like we'll get along well. I was worried that Greg might be annoyed by my mother's overly familiar attitude, but his words reassured me. The following week, we visited Greg's parents' home and we were able to register our marriage without any issues. After moving into our new home, we began our married life. Although our days were going smoothly, there was one thing I felt guilty about. Due to frequent business trips for my job, I often had to leave home early in our marriage. Working from home, Greg took care of the household chores while I was away, and I felt guilty about it, but he supported my work without any complaints. I'm not great at housework, but since you usually do most of it, I've got to put in some effort when she's away. Seeing Greg smile as he said that, I deeply felt how fortunate I was to have married him. One day, when I returned from a business trip, there was an unexpected person at home. Julia, welcome back. The stew will be ready soon, let's eat together. I've already made the salad and put it in the fridge. Mom, you're here? Yes, the person stirring the pot and smiling was my mother. Since it's tough for me to handle the housework alone, your mom came over to help. It's been a real lifesaver. Sitting comfortably on the living room sofa, Greg happily informed me. Look, the stew is ready. Let's all have dinner. Saying this, my mother arranged the salad, cream stew, and baguette on the table. The delicious smell made my stomach growl. Mom, thank you. Let's eat. I thanked my mother and enjoyed her homemade food. It had been a while since I had her cooking, and the familiar taste filled me with warmth. This is delicious, Mother. I could eat this forever. Greg also praised my mother's cooking, and she looked pleased. After enjoying a pleasant dinner together, my mother said, "Oh, look at the time. I should be going," and began to prepare to leave. Mom, thank you for today. Oh, don't mention it. I'll come over to cook again. As I thanked her, my mother smiled happily. From then on, whenever I went on business trips, my mother would come over to take care of the house. I was grateful to her, but Greg's behavior suddenly became strange. It happened one ordinary morning. We were having breakfast together, and while I was washing dishes, Greg suddenly spoke up. Julia, why don't you grow your hair out and try curling it? As it is now, you seem to lack femininity, maybe it's charm that's missing. What? Why all of a sudden? It was the first time Greg had said something like that, so I was shocked. Well, Julia, you just lack sex appeal. Your makeup is so natural, too. Can't you make it more glamorous? I don't like heavy makeup. And I prefer my hair short like this. I answered calmly. Then, Greg laughed mockingly. I can't believe such a plain woman is the child of such a beautiful mother. What? I couldn't believe my ears. I had never imagined that such a day would come. Why would you say such a terrible thing? Why compare me to Mom? I asked, trembling. It's just the truth. Greg said dismissively and retreated to his room. Despite my pleas for him to stop, he continued to compare me with my mother, and I felt my love for him fading. One day, I returned from a 3-day business trip, and my mother had come over to cook again. Julia, welcome back. I made fried chicken today. While I was grateful that my mother came to help, Greg's recent constant comparisons between me and her had started to upset me. Mom, you came today too. Thank you. I kept my swirling dark emotions hidden and thanked her as usual. My mother smiled warmly at me, but Greg sighed softly upon seeing my face. Oh, you're back already. I felt my heart grow cold at Greg's words, but I pretended not to hear and went to the bedroom to put away my luggage. As I looked down at the floor, I noticed a long strand of hair. Picking it up, I muttered. Why is this here in the bedroom? It was clear that the hair wasn't ours. Mine is short, and so is Greg's. Sensing that it belonged to my mother, I immediately returned to the living room. Hey, there was a long hair in the bedroom. This is Mom's, isn't it? Why is it in the bedroom? I asked my mother and Greg, trying to remain calm. Both looked surprised at first, but then my mother started to laugh. Oh my, you're right, it's my hair. It must have fallen out when I was cleaning the bedroom today. Exactly, your mother was kind enough to clean our bedroom. You should be grateful. Greg agreed with her. Despite being my mother, the fact that she had entered our bedroom made me uncomfortable, and I couldn't help but suspect something about their relationship. However, since my mother had been helping out with the housework, I couldn't press the issue further. Around this time, my accessories and bags started to mysteriously disappear from the bedroom. I asked Greg about it, but he kept insisting he didn't know anything. About a month later, Greg said something like this. You know, I've got a business trip coming up tomorrow. It's just for 1 night and 2 days. Although he usually works from home, occasionally he does visit clients. Really? That's unusual. I didn't think much of it at the time and just responded casually. However, Greg seemed unusually cheerful while packing for the trip, which gave me a bad feeling. Curious, I decided to check the contents of his travel bag while he was in the bath. Inside, I found travel brochures and new clothes that clearly weren't for work. This isn't for a business trip, is it? It was probably for a vacation. And if it were a solo trip, he wouldn't need to lie to me about it being a business trip, which means he must be going with a woman. That woman was likely my mother. I had always suspected something between Greg and my mother, but now I was convinced they were indeed having an affair. My head was a mess with anger and disappointment, but I quickly put everything back as I heard the bathroom door open. Although I wanted to confront Greg immediately, I decided to wait until I had solid proof. Well, I'm off. The next day, as he left with a broad smile, I watched him go, sighing inwardly. I considered following him to gather evidence of his infidelity, but then remembered something crucial and decided to check it immediately. The afternoon after Greg left for his trip, he unexpectedly called me. Hey, Julia. Something terrible has happened. I'm at your parents' house right now, and it's completely burned down. What? I couldn't help but respond incredulously. Stop joking around. I'm not joking. Come to your parents' house right now. Your mom is in a daze. It seemed they were together after all. Although I wanted to confront them about this, I was more concerned about my parents' house being completely destroyed. Explain in detail. As I asked calmly, Greg started to explain. It seems the fire was caused by a cigarette my mother discarded in a trash can. Fortunately, the houses nearby were far enough away that the fire didn't spread. I have many things I want to ask you both, but for now, I'm heading over there. I ended the call and rushed to my parents' house. It was indeed completely burned down, and the area was crowded with onlookers. Seeing my childhood home, filled with memories of my father, gone was a shock, and I almost collapsed from grief. However, I managed to hold myself together and stared at the charred remains. Then Greg and my mother approached me. In stark contrast to my sorrow, both of them were smirking. It seemed my mother had been questioned by the police but was released as there was no sign of foul play. Let's go home. With that, we took my mother back to our house. As soon as we arrived, Greg announced cheerfully. From today, your mother will be living with us in this house. I've got both a boyfriend and a housekeeper. Of course, by housekeeper I mean you, Julia. Leaning on Greg, she declared this. At this, my patience finally snapped. Don't joke about this. How can you say such things so calmly in this situation? Mom, our family home burned down. The house filled with memories of Dad is gone. Greg, you're really out of line. I shouted at them, but Greg just laughed and said, Don't get so worked up. Showing that my words didn't affect him at all. Mother similarly laughed. Oh, Julia, you're too angry. By the way, Greg and I will share a bedroom, so Julia, you sleep in another room. Dumbfounded by their attitude, I fell silent. Then Greg added. What's the matter, too shocked to speak? Julia, you must be surprised to find out that your mother and I are dating. Still laughing foolishly, he continued. We're so in love. Sorry, dear. From today, I'll be living here too, so you'll need to take care of me as a housekeeper. At her words, I couldn't help but retort sharply. Disgusting. You're too shameless. I already knew about your relationship. I have evidence, so expect a lawsuit for damages. What? Evidence? Both Greg and my mother looked stunned, but I showed them the hidden camera I had installed in the bedroom. Lately, my personal items from the bedroom have been disappearing, so I set up a camera thinking I'd catch the thief. But what I found was you two cheating. So, you knew. Well, that makes things easier. Honestly, I prefer your glamorous mother over a plain and boring woman like you. Let's get a divorce. Looking down on me, Greg said, and my mother also smiled. Sorry, Julia. You don't need to tell me, of course, we're getting divorced. I then opened my laptop, downloaded the divorce papers from the government website, and printed them out. I signed my part and handed them to Greg. Sign your part, quickly. You're surprisingly obedient. I thought you'd make more of a fuss. Why would I fuss? My love for Greg had turned into less than zero. As I said earlier, I'll be suing you both for damages. Be prepared. At my words, my mother burst into laughter. Go ahead, sue us for as much as you want. Greg also chuckled. Julia is such a greedy woman. Ignoring them, I began to pack my essentials and left the house with the filled-out divorce papers. After submitting the divorce papers at the town hall, I decided to stay at a hotel and started looking for a lawyer immediately. I was filled with strong anger, thinking about bringing both of them down as I browsed through various law firms' websites. However, I knew that even without my intervention, they would end up facing painful consequences. There was something about Greg that my mother didn't know. If she found out about that thing, she would definitely cry out in despair. The next morning, I was awakened by a call from my mother. Hey. What do you mean Greg has debts? I didn't know about this. She shrieked right as she started talking, and I couldn't help but smile. Yes, Greg actually had debts. Greg had tried to start a business before we were married and failed, but I knew about it and married him anyway. I was prepared to help him repay his debts, and I had been assisting with the repayments until now. Julia, are you listening? I thought Greg was a high earner. He gave me lots of gifts. As her voice trembled, I responded coldly. Greg, a high earner? That's not possible. Most of his salary goes to debt repayment. He used to contribute to the bare minimum living expenses, but recently he's been spending it on gifts for you, so I've been covering our living costs. Since Greg started making comparisons between me and my mother, he had almost stopped contributing to the household expenses. What? Wait, what about the compensation? I thought Greg would pay that. My mother shrieked. I will demand compensation from both Greg and you. I'm currently looking for a lawyer, so I'll send you the bill later. You said I could sue for as much as I wanted, so expect it to be a hefty amount. Make sure you pay it. Wait. I don't want a poor man. I'll return Greg to you, so please don't demand compensation. I don't have any savings. Return him? I don't want such a man. Besides, I've already submitted the divorce papers. You'll hear from my lawyer about what comes next. Goodbye, I said coldly and hung up the phone. Then, I immediately went to a real estate agent to look for a new place to live and signed a contract as soon as I found a suitable property. During this time, my mother kept calling me, so I got annoyed and set her number to auto-reject. After a while, a meeting was arranged with the lawyers involved. Greg and my mother showed up with a tense atmosphere. A few days earlier, I had received a voicemail from Greg saying that my mother had abruptly dumped him. She changed her attitude the moment she found out I had debts. She looked at me like I was trash and dumped me just like that. I thought she would help me repay the debts just like Julia did. It's too heartless. I never imagined it would come to this. That was the content of the voicemail, but of course, I didn't call him back. It seemed my mother was hopping from one acquaintance's house to another, and now Greg was living alone in the house where we used to live together. I told Greg and my mother. As I said the other day, I will be claiming damages for adultery from both of you. Greg visibly grimaced and muttered. Are you really going to claim compensation? My mother was shrieking. I don't have any money. To which, I calmly responded. Also, the hidden camera I installed in the bedroom captured you, Mom, taking my bags and jewelry boxes. At my words, my mother flinched and started gaping. So, I'll also be demanding compensation for theft. Don't be ridiculous. I'm your biological mother. It's absurd to demand money from a mother. My mother's face turned red as she shouted at me. You did just that, Mother. Among the jewelry you stole were valuable items given to me by business associates. By the way, where did you put those stolen items? Do you still have them? When I asked, my mother defiantly said. I've already sold them. At a recycle shop near the station. But that's okay. A daughter's belongings belong to her mother. Think of it as filial piety and let it slide. Please, I beg you, don't demand any money. At my mother's words, I sighed deeply. Stop talking nonsense. You're no longer my mother or anything to me. You must pay the money. As I spoke coldly, tears welled up in my mother's eyes, and she looked utterly despondent. How could this be? I spent all of Dad's inheritance, and I switched to Greg because he seemed wealthy. Everything has backfired. If I knew he had debts, I would never have gotten involved with him. It seemed my mother had only ever seen Greg as a source of financial support. What? You were after my money from the start. You said you loved me. Greg shouted at my mother. Loving you was obviously a lie. How could I truly love a man who's just somewhat handsome? You should have told me about the debts from the start. Mother and Greg yelled back and forth at each other. The lawyer intervened, and they finally stopped arguing. Hey, Julia. You know best how tough it is for me with these debts. I can't afford to pay compensation. How about we start over? I really need you. Greg pleaded for reconciliation, but I looked at him with disdain. Absolutely not. You only want to reconcile so you can wipe the compensation and have me help with the debts again, right? I can see right through you. Greg couldn't say anything back and just groaned. I told the pale-faced Greg and my mother one last thing. Both of you, you reap what you sow, enjoy your descent into hell together. Later, my mother managed to contact the recycle shop where she had sold my belongings and was able to buy back most of the items. However, she still ended up with debts she couldn't repay. It seems that both Greg and my mother ended up declaring bankruptcy. Unable to pay the rent after months of arrears, Greg was forced to vacate his apartment. As both their lives became more difficult, they reluctantly decided to cooperate and live together, moving to a cheap, dilapidated apartment. The apartment they moved into is about 50 years old and doesn't have a bath. A while later, Greg called me. I considered ignoring it, but a part of me was curious about how Greg and my mother were doing, so I answered. Hello? Julia. Please, I can't stand this life anymore. Lend me some money. Greg began to cry out desperately. Excuse me? There's no way I would lend you money. Besides, I even agreed to let you pay the compensation in installments, and you haven't even finished paying that off yet. I actually wanted the compensation paid in one lump sum, but he pleaded with me, saying he couldn't possibly pay all at once, so I allowed him to make installment payments. Likewise, my mother had begged me to let her pay in installments, so I reluctantly agreed. I can't do this anymore. I can't pay anymore. I declared bankruptcy, and they seized my computer, so I lost my job as a web designer. Now I'm barely getting by with day labor, but it's really tough since it's physical work. He continued to plead while crying, but such things were of no concern to me. As I remained silent, Greg kept talking rapidly. The apartment is so run down it's the worst. There's no bath, so I have to go to the public bath, but even the bathhouse fee is a struggle. There's no air conditioner in the room, so I'm nearly getting heat stroke, and it's so small that my mother-in-law and I are always irritable and fighting non-stop. Greg's voice became tearful, but I felt no sympathy. I don't care about your job loss, your tough day jobs, or your terrible room. Of course, I also don't care about what happens between you and your mother. All I care about is getting the compensation payments. Why are you being so cold? Weren't we married? Was our bond really just that? Anger clouded my vision as Greg spoke. Don't say such absurd things. Who was it that cheated on me with my own mother? Who destroyed our trust if not you, you awful man? Wah. It was the first time I had ever yelled at him like this, and he seemed shocked. It's also my fault for not seeing your true colors and marrying you. If I could, I would go back in time and tell myself that you were the worst right from the moment we met. Isn't that a bit much? Greg responded defensively, clearly shaken. Look, I'm reflecting on it, just lend me a little money. Don't be so cold. You're the one making me say this. I will absolutely not lend you any money. Do you realize how much I've already spent on your debt repayment? Well, I chose to help you with your debt, so I won't complain about that. But stop making ridiculous requests. I firmly told him off, but Greg was still muttering but. Don't contact me ever again. If you need something, go through my lawyer. Goodbye. Wait. Okay, I won't ask for money anymore. But I have a favor to ask of you. Your mother is still splurging on designer bags. Could you at least tell her to stop that? Greg hurriedly spoke in a panicked tone. I don't care. You two got back together, right? Figure out how to help each other and survive. Goodbye. I hung up the phone and immediately set Greg's number to auto-reject. Later, I heard that my mother, unable to curb her spending habits, had contacted a loan shark she found in a flyer in the mailbox. She borrowed a large sum and spent it instantly on designer clothes and bags. Of course, she had no means to repay it and began living a life on the run from dangerous people. Through the lawyer, I heard that my mother was asking for my help, but I naturally ignored it. I hadn't expected my mother to be so obsessed with luxury and brands. When my father was alive, we lived more modestly. Perhaps inheriting my father's estate had caused her to lose control. Memories of my childhood with my mother came flooding back. In our old house that burned down, I used to bake cookies with her. She prepared various cookie cutters and even changed the dough's flavor to match my mood. In those memories, my mother smiled kindly, and I loved her very much. There was a time like that. Gradually, her makeup became heavier and her clothes flashier. There must have been a reason for my mother's change. Now, I neither know nor want to know. One thing is clear, the mother I have now is not the mother I loved. Exhausted from being chased by debt collectors, My mother and Greg moved away like fugitives in the night but somehow continued to make monthly payments, so they must be alive somewhere. As for me, I'm more focused on my work than ever. Since I no longer have to help with Greg's debt repayments, my savings are growing. I'm planning to take a long vacation and travel alone soon.
Hey Max, isn't it rather sinful to do this sort of thing in your wife's camper van?
Isn't it? Honestly, Olivia bought a great substitute for a hotel room.
A hidden camera in the camper van caught a man and a young college girl making love. Furious, I boldly climbed into the driver's seat while they were still at it.
What? Huh?
I threw both of their clothes outside and started the engine. Ah! With a blank look on my face, I drove off while the naked man and woman were crying their eyes out. Hey, where do you plan on going? Isn't it obvious? Just think of the place you least want to go. That's your final destination. Let's enjoy this drive to hell, shall we? With that, I smiled brightly at the two, who were both panicking. My name is Olivia. I'm in my late 40s and I'm a housewife who enjoys the outdoors. My husband Max is of the same age, and we met at a camping site. We hit it off there and started dating, which led to marriage. We both worked, and since we had the same hobby, we never had children, but we lived a fulfilling life nonetheless. I had a small dream. That was to buy a camper van and travel to various places with Max. And recently, part of that dream came true. I took out a loan and bought a camper van. When it was delivered to our garage, it was a bit of a local sensation, and everyone from small kids to the elderly people would say things like, "What's this?" or "This is cool." Now, all I had to do was take a vacation and travel on it. But just when I was thinking that, my work started to get busy. Overtime and working on holidays have increased, and while it's not like I didn't get any time off at all, I couldn't seem to find the right time where I could get enough days off. I did think it was bad luck, but having something to look forward to is a motivation for work. So I focused solely on work for the time being. Besides, I would go inside the camper van to enjoy the camping atmosphere while I was repairing it routinely. Sitting in the driver's seat of the camper van in the garage, thinking about where to go with it, when suddenly there was a knock on the door glass. Startled, I looked in that direction and saw a young woman standing there. "Sorry to barge in like this. I live in the neighborhood, and if it's not a hassle, could you show me the inside of this camper van?" Upon talking to her, it turned out the woman was a college student named Lena who likes camping. She heard that a camper van had been delivered to a house in the neighborhood and came by hoping to see how it looked like at least, but then she saw me deep in thought in the driver's seat and couldn't help but call out. I was pleased to hear that even young women these days are interested in camper vans, and I was happy to show her. But then I became conscious of the time. I had been working overtime until about 11 p.m., and after coming home and having dinner, I had been hanging in and around the camper van, so it was already past midnight. Even though she's a college student, I was worried about letting a girl stay out late, so I decided to postpone it. I don't mind showing you at all, but it's already late today, so please come again during the day. When I said this, Lena said, "Okay," and went home with a happy look on her face. I realized afterward that we hadn't made any plans about when, but I figured we'd meet again soon since we're neighbors. At the time, I thought so in a positive way. A few weeks later, I had completely forgotten about the college student and was planning to take a break in the camper van that day as well. But the lights wouldn't turn on. It seems that the auxiliary battery wasn't charged. Did I use that much electricity? While feeling a bit puzzled, I turned on a flashlight to check the living space. And immediately, I felt something was off. It wasn't ransacked, but it felt like someone else had used it. In particular, I was bothered by a smell that I had never smelled before in the camper van. I wondered if Max had used it, but if that were the case, he would be the first person to tell me about the experience. Whenever he used new camping gear, he always told me about it in details. So it probably wasn't Max. It was then that I finally remembered the college girl. But if it were her, she could have seen the inside just by asking me. There was no need for her to intrude. I thought about consulting this to the police, but there was no clear evidence of any damage. For the time being, I decided to buy a small camera online and set it up in the living room space as a security for a while. I would turn it on before going to work, and then collect it when I come home. For a while, there were days when nothing in particular was recorded. And then, a month later, one night after working on a holiday, as usual, I retrieved the small camera and inserted the SD card into my computer. Was it my imagination that I felt really awkward? Nothing unusual had been recorded on the camera for the past month, so I was thinking of quitting this soon. I haven't told Max about the hidden camera, just in case I thought I shouldn't rule him out as a suspect. However, I felt guilty about suspecting him any longer. As I thought that and pressed the play button, a shocking event was being shown. My initial suspicion had been correct. In the living space of the camper van were Max and the college student Lena. Both of them were in a disgraceful state. They were both being naked. So that's why Max couldn't tell me about his impressions of the camper van. The fact that it was with the college student of all people. Regardless, I cannot forgive them for their love affair in my camper van. So I decided to show them hell. Since that day, I've been pretending to Max that I have to work on holidays and have been going to a detective agency and a law firm. I asked the detective agency to investigate Lena's university, address, and the frequency of their affairs, and I consulted the lawyer about this incident and requested for alimony and the preparation of a certificate of content. The detective agency worked quickly, and information such as her address and the details were available in about a week, and it was found out that Lena was living on her own to go to college. I continued to have them investigate, and their affair became clear. Apparently, they were wildly intimate in the camper van only when I was out of the house for work on holidays. Other than that, they seemed to use a hotel after work or go to Lena's house. I felt nauseous, imagining Max moving into a college student's one-bedroom house. What on earth is he doing at his age? But I am not just overlooking their affair. The preparation for my revenge is almost complete. All I need to do now is wait for the right moment. That day, I told Max I had to work on a holiday and left. And then an hour later, I snuck back into the house without making a sound and broke into the garage. The windows of the camper van, front door, rear, all had their curtains drawn. I approached the camper van and listened. Then from the inside, I could hear the wild voices of Max and Lena. I felt as if everything was going hopeless, but I couldn't just stop here. I opened the garage shutter. Before the shutter could fully open, my parents rushed in and quickly got into the camper van. I had asked my parents to help keep watch so Max and Lena wouldn't run away when I thought of today's plan. From inside, I could hear Max and Lena's voices exclaiming in surprise. I also quickly got into the driver's seat. Then, on the passenger seat, there were clothes that the two had thrown off. I threw them outside and started the engine.
Olivia, what are you doing? I thought you were at work. Why are your parents here?
Max yells at me in the driver's seat from behind. Lena also starts saying, "Stop it! I'll call the police!" I reluctantly turned to the two of them and said this. "Be quiet. We're all going for a drive now. I already know that you two have been doing things in here many times. I have evidence. So feel free to call the police or shake off my parents or even try to disturb me from what I'm doing. But who would be embarrassed to be found naked if there's an accident? You two better think about it." After hearing my words, the two of them fell silent as if they had given up everything. Well then, let's start the drive to hell. After I started driving for a while, I heard a voice saying, "Hey." Until then, no one had said a word, and the atmosphere in the car was exactly like hell. But Lena broke that silence. "Hey! Where are you planning to go? This is going to be a kidnapping, isn't it? If we turn back now, we won't make a big deal out of it. Let's turn back." It's outrageous that she's still not giving up at this point, and even talking as if I'm the bad guy. I felt like being mean to her, so I laughed and blurted out, "Where am I going? It's obvious. I'm taking all of you to hell." Lena let out a small scream. "Eek!" By the way, this is not a kidnapping. Rather, I'm trying to send them home. Look outside. Soon enough, you'll figure out where we're heading. Surely it'd be familiar to you. And then Lena pulled back the curtains slightly. As Lena saw the outside view, she started to tremble violently. No. This is our hometown. Please, I beg you, not my parents' house. My parents can't find out about this. When Lena said this, there was a loud thud as if something had fallen to the floor. Apparently, she fell onto her knees on the floor while being naked like that. However, unfortunately for her, I had no reason to listen to what she was saying. I didn't want to hear her annoying apologies, so I turned up the volume on the stereo and continued driving. When we arrived in front of Lena's parents' house, two people who appeared to be Lena's parents came out of the front porch. I didn't get out of the driver's seat but rolled down the window and asked, "Could you please get in the back?" I had sent a content-certified letter to Lena's parents' house and had also given them my contact information. Therefore, they had already been notified that I would be coming here today. Lena's parents, who nodded at my question, opened the door to the living area, and they shrieked, "Lena! I'm sorry for this disgraceful sight. I brought her here while she and Max were making love. If you have any complaints, take it up to your daughter and Max. Oh, and if you two want to continue what you started, feel free to do so right in front of your parents." Looking back, I think I must have been quite mad at that time. But that's how unbearable it was for me to be cheated on in my dream camper van. The drive to hell wasn't over yet. The real show was just beginning. After leaving Lena's parents' house, we got on the freeway and just kept driving. Max seemed to have figured out where we were going next and kept his eyes down, saying nothing. Lena tried to make some excuses to her parents from time to time, but each time she did, she was slapped by her father. As for my parents, they were sleeping soundly, snoring. We kept driving for about 4 hours, and by the time we arrived at Max's parents' house, it was pitch dark outside. His parents, who must have noticed the sound of the car, came out of the front door, just like at Lena's parents' house. I had sent them a content-certified letter as well, and of course, they knew that we would be visiting their house today. We were invited into their house, and Max and Lena hid their bodies with blankets. Once everyone was settled, I explained the situation. I told them how I had felt something was off about the camper van. I told them how I had installed a small camera and caught them in the act of cheating. And I told them that it wasn't a one-time thing, but they had their affair deliberately over and over again. The smell I sensed in the camper van was more likely from their sweat. Once I noticed this, for a while, every day, when I felt even a hint of Max's smell, I felt nauseous. But there was one thing I didn't understand, where Max and Lena had met. Can the both of you explain the exact circumstances that led to this? Saying so while glaring at Max, he began to talk slowly, hanging his head.
It was on a day when you had to go to work on your day off, Olivia. I was chilling at home when Lena came to visit. Wondering who it was, I heard her out and she said she had made a promise with you to see the camper van. So I showed it to her instead. And then... Just as Max was about to say something, Lena cut in loudly. "At that time, he was the one who came on to me, so it's not an affair. Rather, I'm also a victim. I did nothing wrong. I was being threatened." Max began to argue, saying, What are you talking about? Actually, didn't you seduce me? Sure, I did feel something for you, Lena, but I was trying to hold back. Then you said it's okay not to hold back. And you were the one who initiated it. From the audio recorded on the small camera, it is almost certain that the story that Max coming on to Lena was a lie. In addition, the investigation results also showed that she had been having her way with various men, such as male students from the same university, or the manager of the part-time job, and unknown older men she met at the campsite. So, in conclusion, she is a girl who just wants to have fun with any good-looking guy. Still, what a disgusting argument. It seems that I wasn't the only one who couldn't bear the quarrel, as both of their parents were scolding Max and Lena. Well, I don't care who initiated it, whether it was the horny monkey over there or that shameless woman there. What I want is for you both to sign this pledge, and for you, Max, to also sign the divorce papers. That's all. The pledge stated that each of them would pay $35,000 in compensation, and $43,000 for the camper. I don't want to use the camper where you guys made love in anymore. If you can't accept these conditions, I'll contact Max's workplace and Lena's university about this incident. So what do you both want to do? At that, Max's parents said, Take care of your own mess. I'm cutting you off our family.
And left it at that. Lena's parents said, Please forgive us and spare us," while making Lena kneel on the floor and beg. By the way, my parents seemed to be holding back their laughter while watching the disgraceful behavior of Max and Lena. I had brought my parents to keep an eye on Max and Lena, but I didn't expect the two to keep their mouths shut to this extent. Max and Lena, realizing they had no other choice, reluctantly signed the pledge. Of course, I also had Max sign the divorce papers. Having finally become free, I felt there was no more reason for me to stay in this house. So I decided to leave, saying to my in-laws, "I apologize for the inconvenience, but please feel free to do as you please from now on." What surprised me at that moment was the behavior of my parents, who had simply been observing until now. My dad placed his hand on Max's shoulder and started to speak.
Max, you're still quite young, aren't you? Having your fill of a young girl, how was it? Was it fun? Surely it must have been paradise, right? Well, you're in for hell now. Having to pay $72,000 and being abandoned by your parents. You still have a mortgage on your house, don't you? I wonder how you're going to survive from here on out. It'll be interesting to see.
As he said this, a broad smile spread across his face. My mom also gave Max a quick glance and said this. "Olivia is kind, but if it were me, I wouldn't hesitate to cut it off with a pair of scissors." I won't say what exactly it is, though. She then left him saying that. My parents, who are usually so unreliable, somehow made me feel relieved just a little bit. Afterwards, since my divorce, I've moved back into my parents' house. My parents, as always, are laid back. When I told them about the alimony payment, my dad started saying,
"Good. Let's use that money to go out for a nice meal."
But I don't mind his jokes now. I use the alimony money to buy a new car, customized for camping. I wouldn't buy a camper van again, as it only holds unpleasant memories for me now. But my desire to go camping never disappeared. Being single again has given me more time, and now I enjoy going solo camping on my days off. My name is Jessica, a 52-year-old office worker. I live with my husband and my daughter Hannah, who just got a job this year. With my daughter becoming a working adult, I felt a load off my shoulders. But something has been on my mind lately. I've been suspecting my husband of having an affair for a few years now. I haven't gotten any definite evidence yet, but I'm always suspicious about him. My 55-year-old husband doesn't show any signs of middle-aged spread. He looks good and is good at making conversations, so he's always been popular with women. I've only recently started to worry about my husband's potential affairs, but there's a chance he's been seeing other women since a long time ago. Until my daughter went to college, I was busy working while doing house chores and raising my daughter, so I didn't have the time to worry about my husband's potential affairs. My husband hardly helped with house chores or raising our daughter up, and it felt like I was the only one raising our daughter. When my daughter stopped needing my constant attention, I noticed that my husband always returned home late on specific days and would always go somewhere at a certain time on his days off. He would sometimes go on business trips overnight, but whenever he came home, he always seemed happy. Worried about my husband's behavior, I asked him the other day when he was leaving for a business trip. "You always seem happy when you return from business trips. Are your business trips always that fun?" When I asked him this in a somewhat mean way, he replied grumpily.
What are you talking about? Nothing's going on during my business trips. I'm just happy to see you and Hannah.
His quick denial seemed suspicious, but I hadn't thought about hiring a private investigator to check about my husband's affairs. The idea of confirming his affairs scared me, and I couldn't make the right decisions. Perhaps because I was worried about my husband's potential affairs, I've been feeling unwell and have lost my appetite. "Mom, you don't seem to have much appetite recently. Are you feeling okay?" While having dinner together, my husband, laughing, said to me,
Your loss of appetite might be a good thing as a diet, right?
Seeing him tease me, I wanted to scream that it was his fault I felt unwell. Perhaps sensing my anger, my husband quickly changed the subject.
Speaking of which, I have to get a retest for something from my company's health checkup.
Why don't we go to the hospital together and have it checked there? If nothing's wrong, you can feel relieved. I thought that if I took him to the hospital, he might be a little more concerned about me, but surprisingly, he seemed enthusiastic about the idea.
Sounds good. Let's go get checked together.
A few days later, my husband and I went to the local general hospital for exams. The results were to be explained later, but my husband started asking about my health.
Are you still losing your appetite? Do you feel any pain anywhere?
Looking at my husband, who kept asking persistently, our daughter jokingly teased us, saying, "Dad, you're really worried about Mom, aren't you? You really do love her." Even though our daughter ridiculed us like that, I too believe that my husband was genuinely concerned about me. I felt embarrassed for suspecting a caring husband like him of having affairs. As I was beginning to see my husband in a new light, we received a call from the hospital where we had taken the test. They said they had something important to discuss and wanted me to come in. As they specifically requested for me, I grew anxious, thinking it might be a serious illness. Noticing my change after the phone call, my husband asked me about it.
What's wrong? Who was that call from?
My mind was already filled with worst-case scenarios, and I replied to my husband with a pale face. It was a call from the hospital. They said they have something important to discuss with me. I might have cancer. Seeing me on the verge of tears, my husband tried to cheer me up. On the day to receive the explanation from the doctor, my husband suggested taking a day off from work to accompany me. Although the hospital has said that I would be enough, I thought it would be reassuring to have my husband with me in case I was unable to return home due to the shock of hearing about having a serious illness. To be honest, since receiving the call from the hospital, I have been unable to sleep at night, and at this point, my appetite was completely gone. On the day of the hospital visit, I was feeling down from the morning and was unable to think about anything, but for some reason, my husband was energetically cheering me up. His excitement was abnormal and somewhat unsettling, but I tried to be positive, thinking that he was trying to make me feel better. My husband and I went to the hospital and sat in front of the doctor, who promptly asked my husband to leave.
I would like the husband to please wait outside.
Despite my husband insisting on staying to hear the explanation, he was ushered out into the hallway. Once my husband left the room, the doctor told me something shocking.
Your husband has pancreatic cancer and has about 3 months to live. We wanted to confirm with you whether or not to inform him, which is why we called you in today.
I was completely taken aback as I was expecting a diagnosis of my own condition, not my husband's terminal prognosis. Moreover, 3 months would be too quick and not enough, and I was anxious about how my husband would react if he was informed. I received a detailed explanation from the doctor, but I was so shocked that I could hardly remember anything. As I had feared, I was completely paralyzed by the shock of hearing the diagnosis, and I realized it was right to have brought my husband along. However, the one who was sick was not me, but my husband. I didn't know how to tell him about it. In the end, the doctor also told me about my test results.
Ma'am, your test results showed no abnormalities.
At this point, that was the least of my concerns. When I came out of the consulting room, my husband was smiling for some reason and spoke to me in a low voice.
I overheard in the hallway. Are you the one with only 3 months to live?
My husband, who misunderstood that I only had 3 months to live instead of him, almost made me blurt out the truth, but I knew that if I told him now, he would be extremely shocked. I hesitated and replied with a forced smile. That's right. You heard it, didn't you? I decided to go with the idea that I was the sick one for now, and explain it to my husband later. Even on the ride back home, my husband was in a good mood, and he didn't look like he was someone with only 3 months left to live. When we got home, I didn't know how to explain it to my husband. I looked serious, while he was exuberantly happy and frolicking around. My cheerful husband might tell our daughter the lie that I only have 3 months to live, which I wanted to avoid at all costs. Let's keep this a secret from Hannah. I'll talk to her later. While listening to me, my husband was getting ready to go out, and said with a big smile on his face,
I'm going out for a bit.
To my husband, who was about to leave, I said with a worried look on my face, Don't overdo it, okay? My husband laughed and replied,
You're the one who shouldn't overdo it.
I began to doubt whether my husband, who left the house so energetically, really had pancreatic cancer. That day, when my husband returned home, he started checking the amount of my life insurance and asking about the balance of my savings, and he seemed to be fully expecting me to pass away. Watching my husband like this, I felt foolish for worrying about him until now. Still, when I think that he only has 3 months left to live, I feel sorry for him, and I can't stop wondering how to tell him the truth. My husband, who didn't seem to care about my concerns, took a surprising action. It seems that my husband was indeed having an affair, and he confessed it on his own.
Jessica, I'm sorry. The truth is I've been cheating on you. I thought it would be sad for you to pass away not knowing the truth about me. So, I decided to confess.
If I really only had 3 months left to live, I would rather pass away not knowing the truth. But I guess my husband must have felt really guilty. I didn't know what to say to him, but then he tells me something even more appalling.
And do you mind if I go on a trip with my mistress? You know, with caregiving and funeral arrangements coming up, we'll be quite busy, right? Think of this as my last request, and just let me do as I please.
Indeed, my husband was about to embark on a life of battling illness. It would certainly be his last request, so I let him have his way. I might be abnormal for allowing my husband to go on a trip with his mistress, but a husband who honestly asks his wife for permission to go on a trip with his mistress is also weird. I was worrying about how to tell my husband about his terminal illness, but now I couldn't care less. Seeing my husband, who has acted freely and acknowledged his affair the moment he learned of my terminal illness, and even thinking about my life insurance and inheritance, made me feel pathetic for worrying about how to tell him the truth. Letting him spend the remaining time as he likes seems to be the best thing for my husband. My husband applied for a leave from work and started preparing for his affair trip. I was concerned about his health, but there was no problem at all, and he was more energetic than usual. Even before he left for the trip, he seemed to go to his mistress's house every day, returning home only to change clothes. I couldn't help but worry about my husband's health, so I spoke to him when he came home to change his clothes. If you feel sick, go to the hospital right away. My husband looks at me with a puzzled expression and retorts,
Are you okay? You're the one who should be going to the hospital, not me. There's something wrong with your English.
It seemed like he thought I was confused due to my illness while I was actually worrying about him. Our daughter seemed to notice something odd about her own father and asked me this. Is Dad having an affair or something? He comes home in the morning every day. Why don't you complain about it, Mom? I thought I should tell our daughter, so I told her about my husband's terminal diagnosis and how he misunderstood it as my own. I thought our daughter would be shocked, but her reaction was surprisingly mild. My husband, who never helped with taking care of our daughter and never participated in our daughter's school events, might have just been a roommate to her. For our daughter, it seemed more unacceptable for her father to go out and play with his mistress than his terminal diagnosis, and she became angry. I can't believe you're allowing Dad's affair, Mom. I would never forgive him if it were me. Whether I forgave him or not, he had been cheating on me behind my back all this time, so it didn't matter anymore. On the contrary, the more he did as he pleased, the greater his surprise and despair would be when he found out the truth. My husband, who got his paid leave, went on a trip with his mistress as promised. By then, I had forgotten to worry about my husband's health and how to tell him the truth. Seeing my husband enjoying his affair trip without keeping it a secret from me finally sparked my anger, and I started worrying about my husband's life insurance and savings, just like him. I considered divorcing him and claim for alimony, but my husband, who thought I was dying, would surely oppose it. He wouldn't want to lose his insurance money, nor would he want to pay alimony. Even for me, knowing that my husband's days are numbered, there's no need to insist on a divorce. My husband will be gone soon. I wondered if my husband was counting on my life insurance and property. He seemed to be off on lavish trips, almost using all our savings. In addition to traveling, he indulges in luxurious meals every night, and our savings were decreasing rapidly. I, who had no expectations for any inheritance from my husband, wanted him to spend our assets as he pleased. Eventually, my husband returned from his affair trip. Seeing me looking healthy, my husband asked an inappropriate question.
You seem to be doing pretty well. How long are you planning to live?
Actually, you're the one who only has 3 months left to live, you know? You misunderstood what you overheard. Hearing the truth, my husband couldn't believe it right away. He looked at me, laughing, and responded. However, I was dumbfounded that he could say such a thing to his own wife, whom he had been with for many years. I had decided to accept my husband's fate in the past few days. I was no longer troubled by his affair, and perhaps because my stress had lessened, my stomach felt good, and my appetite had returned.
That can't be true, can it? I'm in such good health. There's no way I only have 3 months left.
Indeed, he was surprisingly energetic. The next day we went to the hospital together and had the doctor explain. Even after being shown the results of various tests by the doctor, my husband seemed unable to believe that he had pancreatic cancer. However, it seemed that my husband had experienced symptoms explained by the doctor during his cheating trip, and his complexion quickly turned pale. My husband asked the doctor again for confirmation.
Doctor, do I really only have 3 months to live?
When the doctor silently nodded, my husband dropped his shoulders, looking depressed. My husband was immediately hospitalized, and strangely enough, he started to look worn out, a different person from when he thought I was the one with a pancreatic cancer. When I told the doctor that my husband had misunderstood and thought I was the one with a cancer, the doctor looked convinced.
That's why I was hesitant to tell the patient the truth.
According to the doctor, there are people who become depressed upon hearing their diagnosis, and their symptoms get even worse. My husband must have been very happy to know that I only had 3 months to live. Perhaps that was enough to slow the progression of his cancer. My hospitalized husband seemed to have broken up with his mistress, as he wasn't in contact with her, so I decided to tease him a little. Your mistress hasn't even come to visit, has she? You don't have to worry about me. You can call her here if you want. My husband answered in a weak voice.
I broke up with my mistress. Or rather, I was dumped. She won't take my calls anymore. She told me to stop calling.
Apparently, the mistress was only with my husband because he took her on trips and bought her things. A guy like him being hospitalized isn't at all attractive for her. Furthermore, my husband was planning to rely on my life insurance and the money he was going to inherit, as he promised the mistress to buy her luxurious things. However, it would not be my life insurance but his own that would be paid out. The mistress may be cold, but our daughter only visited my husband once in the hospital and hasn't shown up since. That single visit seemed like a final farewell. I may not cry when you die, Dad. I don't remember you ever playing with me, and you never came to my school events, so goodbye. As expected, my husband was horrified by my daughter's words, but I felt that it couldn't be helped. My husband, just as the doctor had predicted, passed away 3 months after being told of his condition. Looking back, I wonder if he had any regrets at all, since he enjoyed traveling with his mistress. It was so like him to invite his mistress instead of me to the trip. I had taken a break from work to take care of my husband since he was hospitalized, but he never thanked me, which was typical of him. Our daughter, who had always been harsh to her father, looks like she actually misses him, which was somewhat relieving. If she seemed happy after his death, I would have been saddened by the thought of having raised such a cold daughter, but it seemed she did feel a little sad without him. Although my husband left nothing but life insurance, he left me the most important thing, our daughter, and for that, I must be grateful. My health has completely recovered, and my appetite has increased so much that it's becoming a problem now. I need to be careful not to overeat, and live happily with my daughter.
I was so taken aback I had to rub my eyes. Because there, where he wasn't supposed to be, was my husband. What? Why? Why are you here? My husband was supposed to be on a business trip to New York. And yet, why was he in Los Angeles, in a hospital of a neighboring city? The shock didn't stop there. Next to my husband sat a woman and a child, snuggled up close. The mother and child were smiling gently at my husband, and he in return was smiling warmly at them. Anyone who didn't know better would think this was a snapshot of a happy family, but I knew differently. What I was witnessing was an odd scene where my husband was with an unknown mother and child. I couldn't just stand by and let this pass. I slowly approached them and called out from behind. My name is Vera, 35 years old. After graduating from university, I started working at an advertising agency, got married at 28, and it's been 7 years now. My daughter Emily, who I gave birth to when I was 30, is almost 5 now. She's been growing up healthy and strong, without any major illness. My husband Jacob is a corporate employee, but he's been increasingly busy for the past few years, frequently coming back late at night and going on business trips. And for that reason, our daughter Emily has developed a slight aversion towards him. Mommy, is Daddy coming home today? That day, as I was preparing dinner, my daughter asked me. I paused from my cooking looking at her and replied, He will come home, but he might be late as usual. Daddy seems to be busy with work. Really? Then it's just you and me until bedtime? Yes, that's right. Yay! Hey Mom, let's watch the anime we recorded together. Okay, after we eat dinner and take a bath. Okay. My daughter's face lit up instantly and she went to spread a tablecloth in the living room. Seeing my daughter visibly happy about my husband's late return, it made me feel a bit complicated, but it couldn't be helped. It wasn't unreasonable that my daughter wasn't attached to him. My husband only came home to sleep. We used to go out as a family on our days off, but the last time we did, that was more than a year ago. My husband's work was so busy that working on weekends was not unusual. On his days off, he would go out alone. He was home very rarely, and when he was, he just locked himself in his room to watch movies or browse the internet. Especially in the last year, he had no conversation with our daughter, and they didn't speak to each other even when they were face to face. I was always the one who had to mediate, which was quite stressful considering we are a family. Our daughter Emily is almost 5 now. If we keep going like this, I'm afraid she will really stop being attached to my husband. We used to go out as a family, and my daughter loved my husband. I want them to go back to how they used to be. Thinking of this, I decided to wait for my husband's return for changing this situation. When I greeted him with a welcome home as he came home at late night, he made a clearly displeased face. Although I was a bit annoyed by his attitude, I decided to start a conversation anyway. Hey Jacob, you haven't had a proper conversation with Emily for about a year, have you? Not really, I don't think so. There's nothing to talk about. You are her father. I wish you would act like one. All of her friends go out as a family. And only our house doesn't even talk to their father. Don't you think that's sad? What's the point of saying that? I'm not playing around. I'm working. I understand that, but I think Emily is the one suffering if this continues. My husband sighed in annoyance and slumped heavily on the sofa. When I sat down next to him, Jacob, loosening his tie, slowly told me, I'm sorry, but I'm really busy right now. I'm up for a promotion and I want to focus on my work. I can see your dedication to your job, but isn't family also important? I understand that working on weekends is tough, but maybe just one day. I don't want to be left behind by my coworkers. You understand, right? I'm working this hard for our family, don't you see? I understand that, but... At this point, I hesitated. I know that my husband is working hard, dedicating his all to his job for the sake of his promotion. But in his immersion in his work, he seems to have lost sight of our daughter and me. If things continue this way, it's not just his relationship with our daughter that's at stake, but our entire family bond might be at risk. Feeling anxious, I gathered my courage and decided to be frank about my feelings with my husband. Jacob, please, I understand you're busy, but I want you to keep Emily's birthday free. Huh? Her birthday? Yes, it's the first Sunday of next month. Actually, her birthday is on Friday, isn't it? But I also have work on weekdays, so I want to take her somewhere on Sunday. I don't know about next month's schedule yet. But at this point, there aren't any business trips scheduled, right? Even if it's a work day. You can take one day off. Please, for Emily's sake. Despite my persistent pleas, my husband tersely said, "Alright, I got it." I knew he was in a bad mood and he agreed reluctantly, but I was still relieved and happy. The next day, while having dinner, I asked Emily, "Hey Emily, your birthday is coming up, isn't it? Is there something you want?" "Wow, really? I want an ice cream maker." "An ice cream maker, huh? Well, let's go check it out together next time." "Yes! Yay! I'm so happy!" Watching my daughter happily enjoying her hamburger, I thought this was a good moment, so I put down my chopsticks, looked into her eyes, and asked, "So, Emily, how about we go out with Daddy on your birthday?" "Huh? Daddy? Isn't he working?" "Daddy said he's going to take the day off for your birthday. So let's go somewhere you want to go, just the three of us." Really? I want to go to the amusement park." "Alright, then let's go to the amusement park." "You can choose anywhere you like, as long as it's somewhere we can go, okay?" "Yay, Mommy! Thank you!" Throughout the meal, she was restless, repeatedly asking, "Is Daddy really coming too? Can the three of us really go?" It was adorable and I couldn't help but smile. I thought she disliked her father, but it seemed she was indeed lonely deep down. She seemed much happier than I had imagined, particularly at the prospect of the three of us going out together. One day, with the weekend trip to the amusement park with my daughter ahead, my husband, unusually home earlier than usual, awkwardly began, "Well, you see." I asked what was wrong, and after a moment of silence, he reluctantly spoke. "I have a business trip from Thursday to Sunday this week." "What? What are you talking about? We promised to keep those days free for Emily's birthday, didn't we?" What can I do? The one who was supposed to go suddenly couldn't, and I was the only one available as a replacement. "Even so, why didn't you refuse? Do you know how much Emily was looking forward to it?" What could I have done? It wasn't a situation where I could just refuse. Despite our daughter sleeping in the next room, my husband raised his voice in anger. "Hey, Emily is sleeping, so..." Despite my attempts to calm him down, he continued to yell, his face turning red. "You have it easy, working in a company where you can leave on time, but it's not like that for me. In a highly competitive environment, everything depends on how quickly you can get promoted." What's with all this talk about promotion? Sure, I understand work is important, but what about us? What about your family? Supporting your husband is also a wife's duty. This is why I can't stand people working in cushy jobs. What? At least can you come back early on Sunday? That's impossible. The business trip is in New York, and it takes 5.5 hours one way by plane. In any case, I can't get out of the business trip starting from Thursday. You two should go on your own. Wait, Jacob! Ignoring my call, my husband left the living room. Only my sigh echoed in the room. Time passed as I struggled with how to explain to our daughter. On Thursday night, the day my husband left for his business trip, I reluctantly decided to tell her the truth. Hey Mom, I was thinking about the amusement park I want to go on Sunday. I'm sorry, Emily, but actually, Daddy has a business trip from today until Sunday. So, he has work? Yes, I'm sorry. So, would it be okay if it's just the two of us? Okay, then I'll go to the amusement park with just Mom. A moment of silence spoke volumes about her feelings. She probably wanted to go as a family of 3. But to prevent causing me distress, she pretended to be okay. Noticing this, I felt a wave of guilt that almost brought tears to my eyes. However, I managed to hold back my tears for the sake of my daughter, who was smiling in front of me. Even though I'm alone, I'm determined to make Emily enjoy herself on Sunday. Several days later, on the day of the amusement park visit, my daughter woke up early in the morning and started preparing to go out on her own. We left the house at 7 a.m. so that we could enter the park as soon as it opened. My daughter seems to be really looking forward to it. She was excited and happy throughout our time at the amusement park. But on closer inspection, her face was slightly flushed. Worried, I stopped her. Emily, wait a minute. What is it, Mom? I grabbed her arm and put my hand on her forehead. I felt the tremendous heat. Wait, Emily, you have a high fever. Why didn't you tell me? I'm not feverish. Come on, Mom. Let's go ride the merry-go-round. Emily, I think you have a very high fever. Should we go to the hospital together? No, I finally got to come here with you. Emily! Perhaps her body was really in pain. She collapsed on the spot. Why didn't I notice it until it got this bad? Driven by guilt, I carried my daughter and drove hurriedly to the university hospital. I informed the reception that it was our first visit and rushed to pediatrics. Her temperature was over 40 degrees and she was immediately given an IV. We'll keep an eye on her here, so you should rest a little too. The kind words from the nurse slightly calmed my desperate heart. I decided to take a break on a bench in the rest area after going to the hospital store and buying some necessary items for my daughter. As I walked around the hospital, I heard a familiar voice. When I turned to where the voice was coming from, there was an unbelievable person there. Huh? Jacob? Why are you here? I couldn't believe my eyes. My husband should have been on a business trip to New York. Despite this, why is he in Los Angeles and even in a hospital in the next city? That wasn't the only surprise. Beside my husband was a woman and a child, seated as if leaning against him. Mom, we're going shopping after the hospital visit, right? Yes, we are. The 3 of us, with Dad. Yay! Soon we can go out as a family of 4. I'm excited. You're about to become a big sister, so you need to be responsible, okay? From what I overheard, it seems the mother is pregnant with her second child. Her stomach was round, and my husband was happily stroking it. The mother and child were smiling softly at my husband, and he was returning the smile kindly. If a stranger saw them, they might think it's a scene of a happy family, but not for me. What I was seeing was a strange scene of my husband being with a strange mother and child. I couldn't just stand by and let this slide. I clenched my fist, shaking with anger, and bit my lower lip. So that's how it is. Working on holidays? Business trips? In the end, all were lies. I can't forgive him for continuously betraying me and Emily. I took steps towards them, stood behind them, and slowly opened my mouth. Your business trip, it's over already, huh? At the sound of my voice, my husband turned around abruptly. His face had an expression as if he had seen a ghost. While turning pale, my husband desperately squeezed out words. Vera, why are you here? Emily and I went to the amusement park, but she got a fever. She's getting an IV right now. More importantly, why are you here? No, well, that is... Who are these people? Upon hearing my question, the woman next to him looked down, her face turned pale. Who are you, miss? A friend of mom and dad? Hello. What were you doing just now? Today's the day of mom's prenatal checkup. Even though dad is busy with work, he always accompanies us to the hospital. Really? That's nice. You must really love your mom and dad. Yeah, we're going to the amusement park together next time, right, Dad? My husband, startled, forced a strained smile on his face. Just then, the little girl said she was going to the restroom, providing me the perfect opportunity to confront my husband. Would you care to explain? No, it's not like that. This is... What's not like what? From what I heard, you're the father of both that girl and the baby in her mother's womb. Yet you kept telling me and Emily that you were working or on a business trip? Just how low can you stoop? Wait, let's calm down for a moment, okay? I wasn't planning to leave you or anything. Driven by anger, I grabbed the collar of his shirt and pulled his face close to mine. Close enough that our noses almost touched. I stared at him coldly, my voice a harsh whisper. Don't mess with me. How far will you go to betray Emily? Are you really her father? Don't make me laugh. After deeply hurting your own daughter, you dare to father another child with someone else? You're nothing but an irresponsible scumbag. No, it's not like that. Please, forgive me. Forgive you? You have the audacity to say something so convenient. Neither Emily nor I will ever forgive you. When we get home, I want you to fill out the divorce papers. Get ready for it, alright? With the fierce shove, I pushed him away and stormed off. On the way home with my now stable daughter, I stopped by the city office and picked up the divorce papers. Once we got home, I gently explained everything to my daughter in a way she could understand. She seemed to take in everything I said, and in the end, she said this. I'm glad it's not Mom who's leaving. What? You always look so sad when you talk to Dad. As long as I'm with Mom, I'll be okay with anything. But Emily, I thought you loved... I did love him, but I love Mom the most. I hate anyone who hurts my mom. Emily... My daughter's smiling face blurred through my tears. In order to hide my about-to-fall tears, I held my daughter tightly. Afterward, I divorced my husband. I made sure to claim alimony from him and the woman who was about to have his child. He desperately tried to negotiate for a lower amount, stating, we have a child. Or, we're about to have our second child. But I firmly refused. There was no way I was going to lower the amount or let him take the lead. After all, they were the ones who did wrong. It appears that Jacob had been regularly taking time off work and visiting the other woman. This was found out by a coworker shortly after the divorce, which caused his credibility to plummet. His career advancement came to a sudden halt, and he started getting cold stares from his colleagues. Apparently, Jacob was having a child with another woman even though he's got a family. Ew, gross. Not only is he incompetent at work, he doesn't even have basic morals. Well, it would be a relief if he just quit already. Despite the rumors and criticism, he is somehow clinging onto his job, presumably for the alimony and the child supports he owes me. I'll sit back and see how long he can keep this up. On my end, I moved to an apartment near my workplace and started a new life with my daughter. My parents regularly visit us to keep my daughter from feeling lonely. As a single mother, I'm aware that I might make my daughter feel sad in the future. But I'm determined to shower her with all the love I can to minimize such situations.